What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into another episode of the Behind the Mic podcast, where we peel back the curtain on the sports media industry and find out all about the people in it, what makes them tick, and what they do in their everyday life and how they get into the field. Today, I am very honored and pleasured to be joined by none other than the Boston Herald's Patriots beat reporter, Doug Kyed. Doug, before we get into it and before we get into the nitty-gritty about how you got to where you are, thank you so much for joining me, and how are we doing today?
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. I'm doing all right. I said to you earlier, I had plans for the day. They got canceled. You asked at the perfect time if I could join the podcast, and here we are. So yeah, I'm happy. I'm good.
Love it. Appreciate it. Yeah, thank you. It was kind of short notice, so thank you for coming on and finding the time. So I like to start this with a segment we call Resume Time, where basically the floor is yours to tell us how you got to where you're at now, working alongside Andrew at the Boston Herald. So you can kind of structure it however you want, but how did you get to where you are today?
Absolutely. I first of all, I wouldn't advise anyone to take this path that I took to sports journalism, but I think it is a good example that there are multiple ways of getting into sports journalism that don't necessarily include, the traditional like interning at the Boston Globe and getting a job straight out of college, those kind of things. But I guess my passion for sports started when I was a very little kid. There's like videos of me when I was 2 years old in Edmonds, Washington, like telling my parents, what teams certain football players played on, and like Steve Largent statistics from the Seahawks and things like that. But I started writing a little bit for my high school paper when I was in high school at Sharon High School, and that led me to Emerson College in Boston, where I graduated with a broadcast journalism degree. And the whole like broadcast journalism thing, I wasn't super keen about because a lot of it was like heavy news and hard news and, breaking down newscasts and all those kind of things. But really my senior year of college, I was taking a summer class to get enough credits to graduate. I took it with John Rook, who's the PA announcer for Gillette Stadium. And we did things like, we covered a Paw Sox game. It was like just a lot of, just writing about sports. And I think that was really the first time that I was like, oh, I could 100% do this for a living. Like this could be the rest of my life is doing this. I wasn't the greatest student in college, didn't do a lot of extracurriculars. So out of college, I started writing for the Sharon Advocate, my hometown paper, just covering high school sports, like everything, you name it, tennis, lacrosse, field hockey, swimming, all sorts of sports that I had no knowledge of whatsoever, but you just kind of grind it out and figure it out as you go. And when I was in high school and when I was in college, I also worked for Sharon Community Television, mostly taping high school sports games, but then they would also get me on call for play-by-play, whether it was a Little League game or a baseball game, or Sharon tennis is very big. And I had a 12 passenger van at the time. We'll get into the reasons why later on. But like it was helpful to shoot tennis because you would stand on the roof of a van and shoot above the fence or whatever. And Sharon Community Television had their own van, but me having this van helped out. So I wound up doing a lot of like play-by-play for tennis that way as well. So that obviously helped as well. But out of college, started writing for the Sharon Advocate while also working 9-to-5 jobs. And I switched from a job that was, I think I was working Saturday through Wednesday at a job. So that would allow me to kind of write for the Sharon Advocate on Thursday and Friday. I wound up getting a better, just kind of random 9-to-5 job that was more structured, Monday through Friday, 9-to-5 or 10-to-7, whatever it was, where I couldn't really do that anymore. So then I started writing for a blog called NEPatriotsDraft.com because I was, super into the Patriots and super in the NFL draft. It was kind of a perfect, combination for me to start writing for that. I did that while working 9-to-5 jobs for about a year or two, and then got a full-time job at NESN just as like a assistant desk editor or whatever it is. I think once again, my shift, I think, was Saturday through Wednesday. My first shift was 4 p.m. to midnight. So pretty much the most unglamorous hours that you could possibly work while writing about absolutely anything. And then Jeff Howard worked for NESN as their Patriots beat writer prior to me arriving there. And there was someone kind of like bridging the gap, but I knew the Patriots really well. I knew football really well. So I pushed pretty hard to join that beat in 2013. So that was about 9 months after I started working at NESN. I got the job on the beat, I think, in like April or May of 2013. And then.
And how old were you at the time when you started?
At the time, I was, so in 2012, I was 26.
Okay.
2013, I was like 27.
Gotcha.
And basically, I mean, I'm not sure the exact way it happened, but like for that season, I was covering the beat by myself for the next 3 years or so. So I wound up working at NESN from 2013 until 2021.
Okay.
Zach Cox joined me on the beat in 2016, I believe it was. And then, I just kind of wanted to spread my wings a little bit more. There was kind of some internal stuff going on at NESN, and I joined PFF as a national NFL reporter in 2021. That only lasted for about a year and a half before PFF decided to shut down their news department. So got laid off, I think, in December of 2022. Worked for A to Z Sports as I forgot exactly what my title was, but I was like a managing editor, I think it was, where I was managing a staff of like 16 or 20 or something like that, while also covering the Patriots, covering the NFL. And like, I think I've talked about this before, but my family was going through some like health issues and stuff. And my daughter was in the hospital. So I knew that my wife might not continue to get health insurance through her job because she was on leave from her job. So A to Z Sports wasn't offering health insurance. Boston Herald, Karen Gregian had just left for Mass Live. I was good friends with Andrew Callahan, and the timing kind of worked out perfectly for me to slide over to the Boston Herald to, exclusively cover the Patriots, rejoin the beat, and it really was kind of perfect timing. So that was the quickest possible way for me to go through the resume and how I was, from birth until the Boston Herald, basically.
So my next question has to do with your time at NESN, because you were obviously there the longest, and that's sort of how you, built yourself up to where you are today. But you mentioned growing up or being in Washington when you were young. You went to Emerson, but you also love Steve Largent. You have a Seahawks helmet behind you. You're a UW fan, as we've talked about all season. Well, how do you divide that? When did you move back? Like, how did that all work out?
Yeah, so I was born in Edmonds, Washington. And I moved to Sharon, Massachusetts when I was 11. So that was 1997. And it's kind of funny when you talk about it now with Seattle sports, but like when I was growing up in Seattle, like the Seahawks were so bad that I think that there was a bigger fandom for the Washington Huskies than there was for the Seattle Seahawks. And like, that's not to say that I didn't, watch the Seahawks. I wasn't a fan of the Seahawks growing up and everything like that. But the Washington Huskies fandom has followed me throughout my whole life. Whereas like, I moved in 1997, like I said, like DirecTV wasn't really what it is today. And like, you couldn't really get every game. The Seahawks changed their uniforms like 2 or 3 years after I moved. So, and another really big factor of me starting to follow the Patriots when I was younger was actually them drafting Lawyer Malloy back in 1996. It was right before I moved. Lawyer Malloy was one of my favorite players on the Huskies. And like the combination of Malloy being on the Husky and being on the Patriots, them having Drew Bledsoe. Randomly, I'd become a fan of Curtis Martin while I was living out in Washington as well. So it kind of, it helped in living a town over from Foxborough also growing up. It just kind of worked out that I started following the Patriots more once I moved here. But certainly still ties to the Seahawks. It was really cool covering Super Bowl 49.
I was just going to say that was in 14-15. So it was just like right when you started, which is crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was really cool. I think the last Super Bowl I got to watch with my dad also was the one that the Seahawks won, which was pretty cool.
Wow.
Because we, he had season tickets to the Seahawks when I was growing up through his work. So we were at the Kingdome all the time, watching the Seahawks, watching the Mariners, all those things. And obviously now my job requires me to kind of focus on the Super Bowl a little bit more. I went to a bunch of Super Bowls, but that was cool getting to watch that game with my dad.
Yeah, that is cool. So NESN, that's where you sort of, you worked there for, I think, 9 years it is. That's sort of where you became who you are today as, one of the top guys on the Patriots beat. I'm curious, while you were there too, I feel like media in general evolved so much from 13 to 22, I think the years are. So like, how did you evolve there? How did you work with that? Were they good about that? I'm just kind of curious, like, again, your time there and how you evolved from writing, social media, reporting, like, all that stuff while you were there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the industry has changed quite a bit in that time. Podcasting's become a lot bigger. So, we had a Patriots podcast for a long time there. I think that probably evolved as we went along. My job just kind of evolved quite a bit when I was at NESN as well, because, like I said, so I started in September of 2012, like I said, just kind of doing like news desk stuff. And then 2013 moved over to the beat, but I wasn't doing a ton of TV right off the bat. They were kind of hesitant to bring on digital people on air. Like they hadn't really bridged that gap between, new media, which is what they called it when I was starting there, and like, and TV or whatever, and broadcast media. But really that was the biggest way that my role evolved at NESN, was that by the end, by the 2019 season, I was probably doing more TV than I was writing. And part of that was, I had Zach on the beat with me, so he could pick up a lot of the leftover stuff that I wasn't picking up writing. But also there was just a lot of turnover and changeover on air at NESN, where they, a lot of people were leaving. They didn't have a lot of bodies. So almost every day down at Gillette, I was doing stand-ups with, Matt Chatham and other people who were down there. My job was about as much like collecting quotes for broadcast than it was for writing. And it was fun to do. I think I prefer the writing side a little bit more, just because I'm a little bit more used to it. But that's a big way that it evolved, is that like I was like begging to be on air, I think, when I started off on the beat. And then by 2019, I was like, all right, like I've been on air.
Let me get a keyboard back in front of me now.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. Like, I'm not sure if this is really the job that I was fully signing up for at that point. So that was a big factor in it. And then also just, getting more comfortable on the beat. I grew up reading, Mike Reese and Tom Curran and Greg Bedard when he was at the Boston Globe and all those people. So that's how I kind of learned how to do the job. But then there's also, obviously, as you know, a big factor of just being down there and 100%. Figuring it out on your own and asking players and coaches questions and getting shut down by Bill Belichick and all that kind of stuff. So I think that was the big thing in that, 9, 8, whatever it was years that I was at NESN, was just kind of building up myself as much as possible to be a respected member of the media and to know exactly what I was doing, and I'm still trying to figure that out.
Yeah. I want to get back to, what you just said in a second about building those relationships, talking to players and things like that. But I wanted to get into PFF first too, because obviously a big jump. I know you weren't there for terribly long. They kind of, like you said, they started the news division and then it kind of, I guess, crashed and burned, if you want to be blunt about it. But what was the biggest difference between being there and being local? Because like I know you still lived around here, you were working remotely more, but what was the biggest difference? Did you like national? Do you prefer local? I'm curious about your brief time doing national coverage.
I think the way that we were doing national, I certainly prefer a local more. Just because there was really two of us in the news division. It never ends. Like the news cycle never ends. Whereas if you're covering a beat, like you have a pretty good idea of when news drops, when something might be happening, when something might be coming. And if something drops, it's only one thing. So it's like you can bring your computer around with you, you can write something real quick and kind of get back with your life a little bit more. Whereas on a national level, like it's always happening. So even if you're not required to like write about what's happening, you still have to be on top of it, tweeting it out, social media, trying to confirm things, all those kind of things. So it really is, it never ends. It never stops. And unless you're at the level of like Adam Schefter, Tom Pelissero, Ian Rappaport, it's kind of a thankless job too, because like you just feel like you're always getting beat. Like, and even if it's something that like there's no way that you would possibly get, like something from a an agency that you don't have a relationship with or a team that you don't have a relationship with, still, if someone gets some sort of breaking news that you don't have, you still feel that little pang that like, oh damn, I should have had that.
Right.
I didn't get that. And that's like, it's to take that over and over and over again is pretty brutal. And, I think that there's a reason why ESPN and NFL Network have been on top of that game for so long at this point. And when I took that job, I thought it was going to be a little bit more, writing heavy. Whereas when I learned pretty quickly that like they wanted, the goal was to break as much news as possible.
Gotcha.
And
were you working with Ari too?
Yeah, I was working with Ari Meirov. And yeah, it was just like the system that was in place, it was probably never going to happen. So in all reality, they were probably smart to shut down the news division because it was kind of turning more towards like I think they wanted to go a little bit more like pro football talk, like aggregation heavy.
Yeah.
And I was a little bit more realistic about that, being like, listen, we've got 2 people on this staff. Like we can't do all of that. We can't
cover every single thing that happens. Yeah.
Right. Like we either need a bigger staff or like this thing just needs to go away, and it went away. And I think it kind of worked out well for all parties. I'm certainly a lot happier, in my business, like in my business life, in my job right now than I was at that point, just because I felt like there was always pressure on me. So, I mean, yeah, if 20 years down the road or something like that, a better national opportunity came along, like maybe I would consider it. But I also think that, like, I don't know. I think that it did teach me a little bit to be happy where you are.
Yeah.
And to not always be like thinking that you deserve bigger things or entitled to bigger things, because like, quite frankly, they might not work out,
Yeah. Well, I want to get into that then, the news stuff, breaking news, because they wanted you to do that. You sound like, I guess, depending on how you look at it, but the team that was around you and the size of it, whatever, it was challenging. But you've made, I guess, a name for yourself here, being on top of a ton of Patriots news. Like, you were getting beat by Schefter and Pelissero nationally, but here, you're really always one of, if not the first guy on it. So I'm curious how, without giving up the trade secrets and without telling me, who and how you find it out, because technically, I guess we're competition in that. But like, how has building those relationships happened? What did you do? And yeah, I guess how did that come about? Because again, you're really one of the first guys on top of a lot of the news around here.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's tough because I think that's that was one of the big takeaways from going national, is that like I did acquire a lot more sources that way. Like, and I learned better ways to acquire sources, and being on the road as much as I could be at, the Senior Bowl and the Combine and those kind of things certainly helps, because you're meeting people, and you're meeting people from different organizations, and they introduce you to other people, and they introduce you to other people. And like, that's sort of how it works in those events. And then I thought I also like, it made me a little bit less, I don't know if I want to say like nervous, but less hesitant, whatever it is, to reach out to people within the team too, within the Patriots. Cause it's like, everyone else is willing to give up information. Like, why not people on the team? And I think it worked out pretty well that the Patriots were, hiring some new people right around the same time that I came back. I had developed a slightly bigger name probably from being at PFF. So I think that helped as well. But a big thing is just that I think that you need to know your limits with people. Like, you don't constantly want to be bothering someone over like these like tiny little minute details. So like, it really is a lot about like, I feel like picking your spots on things, where it's like, all right, do I need to like confirm this tiny thing, or should I like reach out to this person about something bigger, like a transaction or whatever it is? And like, you kind of learn what people are willing to give up and what they want to give up and what they don't, the more that you do it. So it's like, the Patriots are still pretty hesitant to talk about injuries and like specific injuries and those kind of things. But yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how helpful all of that is, but I think that those are kind of my lessons, at least in the last few years, of of building up better sources and confirming things that are important to confirm. And, after the season or after the draft or those types of things, like getting more context on why things happen too, because that's important. And that's things that people are maybe more willing to talk about after the fact when, they're not going to give up who they're going to draft because that hurts them. That's another big thing too, is that a lot of sources don't want to give other teams a competitive advantage. And that's, I think, why injuries are such a big deal, is that like, they don't want to tell the Bills that, whoever it is, like Trent Brown isn't playing or something like that. But if they feel like giving information is not going to give up a competitive advantage, then they are more willing to do it. And then also this season or this offseason, more than any other, I've been trying to help out sources with things that I've heard about the team, because like this offseason, there was a lot of uncertainty around the Patriots. So like
at front office changes and like, things guys didn't know if they were staying or going and stuff.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, there was times that I knew more about the inner workings of maybe like what the upper echelon of the staff was thinking than someone on the lower level of the team. So I was actually able to, like report to them something that maybe I'm not even reporting publicly at that point. So that helped a lot as well. This
no, that's cool. That's fascinating. It's interesting to hear, like, kind of how it works and how, obviously there's different ways to do it, but no, that's definitely an interesting, some interesting information there on that. So before we get into your favorite part, least favorite part of the industry, and wrap this thing up, I did want to ask about something that I saw on a podcast with you and Andrew Callahan a couple months ago. Andrew was doing something sort of similar to this. I think he was calling it 15 off the field, trying to get a different look at, people and not just talking football. And he mentioned that, and you mentioned that you did a band tour a couple summers ago. I think multiple summers, if I have it right. Or maybe it was just one, but could you talk a little bit more about that? Is sports your true calling? Is music your true calling? Or, what's the deal with that? I'm curious.
So the tours were back in like 2008 and 2009, like right as I was kind of graduating college and getting into this industry. But I played in like punk and pop punk bands all through high school. And I actually was more involved like musically playing in bands than I was in sports, because like you don't really have enough time to do both, I would say. So I played baseball and football like early in my high school career, and then transitioned more to like playing in bands just because that was fun. All my friends were kind of doing it. And I actually wound up playing one season at Emerson in baseball as well. But so it was good to get back into that. But yeah, throughout high school, I was playing in bands. I went on a like 10-day tour when I was after my senior year of high school. I think we went down to like Virginia Beach and back. And then my senior year of college, and then also like after college, I was playing in like a more serious hardcore band. And we toured for like, I toured pretty regularly for I think a year or two. I mentioned the summer class I was taking with John Rook, sports journalism. I actually had to take like 2 or 3 weeks off of that because like our band had a tour booked down to Florida and back. So I was like, hey, I got to go for a while. I'll be back. And like I worked it out with John Rook. But yeah, that was like after college. I didn't get like a normal 9-to-5 job, I think, until maybe 2009, because I was like touring so much in this band. And so I was selling Yankee Suck shirts at Fenway Park. I was selling like those like Lucic Crew shirts at the Garden. I was selling like those shirts at Celtics games. Like that was my job for like a year after college, while also playing in a band. And then also writing for the Sharon Advocate. So I was doing a lot of stuff at once. I was juggling a lot of different things. But yeah, I think like sports and music, I think sports was my first love, because like I said, like I was collecting football cards when I was like 2 and 3 years old. But music, I kind of like shared music and sports from the time that I was like 7 on is my 2 biggest passions. But not doing nearly as much music these days as I am sports. But
do you still play?
I still play guitar. Yeah, I was trying to write some songs the other day on my guitar. We'll see. Awesome. We'll see what comes of any of that. But
love it.
Yeah, it still exists at least. Yeah.
That's cool. All right. You mentioned TV, you mentioned writing, breaking news. You've done feature stories, things like that. including that, but kind of everything what you do in this field, what is like your favorite part of just working in sports media?
It's a good question. Like, I think the obvious answer, I guess, would be that like we get to watch football for a living, and like there's like that's just like a childhood fantasy. I feel like of like, hey, my job is to watch sports, and like I talk to people and then write about what they say, and that's the job. But there's a lot of things that I enjoy about, like, our hours are very flexible in this job, where like a lot of the time you can kind of get stuff done during the day. You can kind of write when you want to. That's fun. The thing that I like writing the most is like sourced, like I was talking about, like writing context on things and why they happened, and just kind of gathering information, not necessarily like breaking news, but breaking down why things happened. But I mean, it all comes down to like, we're just watching sports for a living. I'm friends with, a lot of people in this industry. So that's a big part of it as well. Just like hanging out with people that you like in your job. And that's a huge part of it as well. I know that we all kind of feel that way. Like, we've all got really good friends on the beat. I've got good friends throughout, sports media. Like, this year when I went to the combine, I missed the combine in 2023. I was back this year, and it felt like it was like a reunion, seeing everyone from, people that I hadn't seen for like a year or two, that I've been like going to Super Bowls and combines and Senior Bowls with for all these years. So that's a major part of it for me as well.
And what stinks? What is like the least favorite part? Just like, again, I always contextualize it with what you just said. Yes, we're watching sports for a living, so it can't really stink. But what's something that people might not really think of that is kind of a pain in the ass?
I think, like, I referenced it a little bit earlier, but it probably is just not knowing when things are going to happen. And the fact that, like, during free agency, like, when you go to the gym, you have to bring your laptop with you, or like if you during the free agency or whatever, you have to constantly be thinking about that when you're making plans. And it's not a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 job, which I probably prefer over having to work 8 hours every day. But you work a lot on the weekends, and random stuff comes up. And right now, my daughter's 6, and like, she doesn't love me being gone at night. So like, we're booking our travel for the season, and like, that's a big factor as well, is that like, okay, well, for 8 or 9 weekends out of the year, whatever it is, like, I'm not going to be around from Saturday through Monday or whatever it is. And like, I like the travel aspect of the job, but I don't love the fact that now my daughter doesn't like the travel.
What it does to the family.
Exactly. So those are the big things. But like, overall, we're very fortunate to be doing this. We're kind of, like I said, living out a fantasy, getting to cover sports and watch sports and all that kind of things. But obviously there are things that you complain about. And I think one thing I will say is that, like, with the Patriots under Bill Belichick, you never really knew your schedule for a given week. And I think that was tough. Especially, like I said, like when I was going to the hospital, multiple times a week, not knowing what time I would get to leave or what time I would have to be back down there or whatever it was.
I remember you telling stories about like writing stories in like the hospital bathroom and stuff.
Oh yeah.
Trying to make, right.
Oh, absolutely. And even just like telling like leaving the hospital, and obviously this isn't part of my reality anymore, but like leaving the hospital, my wife being like, when are you coming back? Like, when do I get to go home? And me being like, I don't know. Like, that's up for Bill Belichick to decide that. And, and we don't hear until 6 hours beforehand or whatever it is. And like, I do think some of those things are going to change. But no, I mean, there's things that people on the team even don't know. And they have to kind of fly by the seat of their pants as well.
Yeah. All right. Before we wrap this up and do our fast 5 to finish rapid fire questions, just briefly, and I know you mentioned you're happy with the Herald and, you kind of leaving PFF and all that and stuff, that you're content, but what's next for Doug Kyed? Do you have any bigger dreams, bigger aspirations, content right now? Where do you think this is going to go from here?
I don't know. It's a good question. I want to just continue to, build up sources around the team, maintain the ones that I have, break as much news as possible, keep ascending up the beat, those type of things. And like, right now I am just kind of happy with where I am. I think like eventually I'll try to possibly do more like podcast or broadcast kind of stuff now that I've got a little bit more time on my hands. So I think that would be the one thing to potentially look out for. But beyond that, I'm going to keep rolling. Like I'm kind of content, like I said, job wise right now. And me and Andrew we work very well together.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it as well. So yeah, I wish I had a better answer, but
It's all good.
I think just focusing on the 2024 season and that's what's next right now.
Love it. All right. Fast 5 to finish. 5 rapid fire questions before we get you out of here, Doug. Number 1, what is your favorite thing to do outside of sports?
Currently hang out with my daughter, my 6-year-old daughter, Olivia. She's always looking for fun things to do. She's always looking for an adventure. So even if it's just like taking her to the trampoline park or taking her to the park, like she's she gets very excited about things. And I'm coaching her softball team right now too. So that's been fun to do. Otherwise, like I still go to like concerts and shows a lot. I'm still like somewhat involved in like the hardcore music scene that way. So I like doing that too. And like traveling, that's a big thing too. So yeah.
Any, this isn't one of the questions, but any training camp trips planned for Olivia this year? I know you brought her down last year at one point.
Yeah, she's been begging to come down in training camp again this year.
Awesome.
So, maybe not like the first week or two when things are really active, but when I told her that like, hey, I'm gonna have to go away a few times this season and everything like that, she just keeps being like, okay, but I get to come to practice too, right? I'm like, yes, absolutely, you will be at practice.
That's awesome. All right, number 2, what is the most memorable moment you've had working in this industry so far?
The first one that comes to mind is probably Super Bowl 51. And like specifically the Julian Edelman catch. I just like still remember exactly where I was sitting, like watching that play live and being like, I think he caught that ball. Like turning to Zach and like us being like, no way, he didn't catch it. Did he catch that ball? And like
that's awesome.
Just that week down in Houston in general was really memorable, really fun. All the Super Bowls have been fun for different reasons, but I mean that was just I'm contributing on a project right now, like the most memorable NFL games of all time. And and that was number 1 for me. I know that so that's probably not going to be number 1 on everyone's list or anything like that. But for me personally, Super Bowl 51 is the most memorable game I've ever watched.
Awesome. Number 3, what is the best advice you've received working in this industry?
That's a very good question. I think it is honestly just to like try to give back to sources as much as you like kind of take from them. And obviously, it's never going to be possible to have it be totally 50-50, but that is a good way to kind of let people know that you're thinking about them as well. And that, you can give something back to them as well. I'd probably have a better answer to that. Like, one thing I will say is to shout out to Nick Underhill, who now runs his own site, New Orleans.football. When I joined the beat in 2013, he was covering the Patriots for Mass Live, and he gave me like every single secret to the industry that he possibly could. Like every site you need to check, everything that you need to do, like certain things, like certain logins that you have to have, all these little things. So like, I'd honestly say that like everything that he told me that first year was probably like the best advice I ever got in this industry.
Cool. And number 4, what would you be doing if you weren't reporting on the Patriots for the Boston Herald or working in sports in general?
That's another really good question. And I kind of have to like face that question when PFF laid me off, being like what else could I do?
What would I do?
Yeah, what would I do? Or like, what is this? Whatever it is. I don't know. I'd like to think I'd be doing something maybe music related. That's what I originally went to Emerson for, was like, I thought I was gonna be doing like music production, and then I got into broadcast journalism, but something visual or audio arts, like editing or some sort of broadcast or something I would probably be doing if I wasn't, a sports reporter.
Cool. And number 5, before we get you out of here, Doug, what is your favorite pizza topping?
Bacon is my favorite pizza topping, but pepperoni is up there. My wife prefers pepperoni, so I feel like we have pepperoni pizza more than bacon pizza in this house. But if I'm going to Town Spa Pizza in Stoughton, number one, I will almost always get bacon unless I'm going like 2 or 3 times in 1 month. Then maybe I'll switch it up to like a linguiça or a pepperoni or a meatball. I know that you like pickle pizza, right?
I do. Yes.
I like pickle pizza too, but
okay, good. Good man.
I wouldn't necessarily only get a pickle pizza. If I'm getting a pickle pizza, it'll be like a secondary pizza that multiple people are going to enjoy.
Sure.
Or like I said, like if I've gotten a bacon pizza too often, maybe I'll switch it up and get like a pickle, hamburger, bacon, and onion, like some sort of like
little cheeseburger. Yeah,
exactly. Cheeseburger action on the pizza, something like that. But yeah, I'm pretty liberal with the pizza toppings that I like, but bacon's usually the standby that I rely on.
Love it, and I'm glad you mentioned Town Spot. I'm glad you mentioned that you do like pickle because I think you're the first guest who hasn't pushed back on the pickle pizza yet. So
it's good, and the pickles reviews are good. Like it's not like coming out of like a jar with like green liquid in it. They're high quality pickles. It's good. People should try it.
Don't knock it till you try it.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Doug, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Anything coming down the pipe at the Herald that you want to plug before we get you out of here?
I don't think so. Just, continuing with OTAs, mini camp, all those kind of things. And yeah, it's, then we get a nice little break and then it's on to training camp, which I think will be really fun to watch this season with Drake May and Joe Milton and all those guys. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you doing this.
Absolutely, Mike. Anytime.
All right. If you, anyone listening, follow Behind the Mic podcast at Behind Mic Pod on Twitter and Instagram, and you can subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Thanks again, Doug, for joining me on episode 8, and we will talk to you all.